We go with 365 Sports. So this was Barry Trammell, who was a guest on our show last week, had this to say about Brett Yormark on the additions of basketball schools, Gonzaga and Connecticut. In other words, facing resistance from those who are decision makers, the ADs, etc., along the Big 12. We'll have back roads in an hour and ask him about this. So there was that story. Then Brett McMurphy, Craig just mentioned this a minute ago, had this one, that basketball coaches in the Big 12 in favor of adding UConn to the Big 12, telling Action Network HQ, UConn in the mix as an all-sports addition to the Big 12. Again, nothing has changed since I left other than speculation and maybe the pot boiling a little bit more on what might happen with the Big 12 and football, and then this story continues. It's like an everyday deal.
Yeah, Barry Trammell had some great information from some unnamed ADs in the article, but I mean, you know, if it's Barry Trammell, believe me, it's somebody you'd know if you knew the name. And so Barry talked to a couple of them. They said about UConn, you're talking about a 38,000-seat football stadium that's 23 miles from the campus in Stores, an athletic department that is heavily, heavily funded by the university fund. And the quote in the article I thought was really interesting was one AD said, look, all it's going to take is one president to decide to cut that, and then UConn's got problems. So yeah, an all-sports member just does not make sense to me for UConn. I'm not a decision maker in this at all, as you know, is obvious. But if they're a basketball edition, that's great for the conference, and that can mirror what the SEC has done in football in adding brand. If the Big 12 can do that in basketball with UConn and maybe Gonzaga, then that's fine. But if this is at this current time a Brett Yormark solo mission, that wouldn't surprise me either, because he'll go and work out the deal and then bring it back to the powers that be and say, okay, what do you think? And then try to sell it to them. So I think he probably has 9 or 10 solo missions, and then the ADs deal with it.
Well, you know what? We'll ask Mac whether he has anything behind the scenes that might be disrupting any of that talk. Craig?
Well, I mean, for all we know, Mac might be the unnamed source that's against it. Yeah. So, I mean, we can only take it for what it's worth. But, I mean, he's usually pretty open with us. But, yeah, I mean, he could very well be that unnamed guy who's not in favor of this. But it sounds like whoever that person is, they're not alone. And, quite frankly, we've talked all this expansion stuff and everything else. And I don't know. I feel like it took a really strange turn in the last 24 hours where it basically started blowing up like something was about to happen. And if you really read between the lines, like it's the exact same thing that's been said this entire time. If there's a TV deal that doesn't situate, correctly with potential Pac-12 schools, and they could potentially move. And tell me if I'm wrong, but isn't that the basic gist of all the stuff yesterday, was just that they're waiting to see a deal, and if not, they'll move on it?
Yeah.
So how is that any different than what we've been talking about this entire time?
It's not.
It's not. So it's just, that's what I mean. It's really weird how that became such a thing here just in the last day or so. You'd have thought something was about to break, and at least not today. It's not. Now, maybe by the end of the week that would be the case. I know there's certainly plenty of our, quote unquote insiders and folks who are heavy into realignment on our board who think that, by the end of the week we should. They've kind of referenced by the end of the week as sort of a probably should know something one way or the other. Is how I read AP's post, and this the timeline of it would seem to indicate that these next few days really we should know something. But in terms of UConn and all sports and all of that, I'm with Paul. I think it's fun to talk about, and it's fun to imagine these scenarios. And I think for a lot of Big 12 fans, it's fun to just say, you picked these teams off, right? Because you've been picked over so many times. And I get that as well, especially in regards to the Pac. But I'm not in love with UConn football joining the conference in any way, shape, or form. As a basketball program, men's and women's, absolutely. I think, the women's side could use a powerhouse like that since, Kim Mulkey's no longer coach at Baylor, and they've kind of lost that luster, at least for the time being. Basketball on the men's side, they're the defending national champions. So that's pretty explainable. But, football, it would take me more convincing, and I'm not an athletic director. So you can imagine how much, it's going to take for them to see you know, the potential there and why that would be a good move rather than a dilutive move. So I can completely understand why there's some pushback, or there's at least some, hold on, I don't know about this on the part of some of those involved in UConn All Sports.
We will have a note on